My guest today is Colleen Slaughter, who for over 20 years has been transforming leaders worldwide to unlock their true potential and create meaningful impact. She helps leaders understand their worth at a profound level, creating a ripple effect of purpose and service throughout their organisations and lives. By empowering them to make bolder moves, she assists them to transcend limiting beliefs and self-doubt, unleashing their innate power to achieve remarkable results. I'm sure you're going to enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Let me introduce you to Colleen now. So good morning, Colleen. Welcome to the Transformational Leaders podcast. Great to have you.
Good morning.
Joining me today.
Good morning.
It would be great if you could start by introducing yourself and letting the audience know a little bit more about your background and what you've been involved in, and ultimately how you got involved in changing transformation in the first place.
Oh gosh, sure. That's going to be a long answer. Hope that's okay. Let's say I've always had the nature of wanting to improve. I've always had that kind of both starting with myself. If there's a challenge, I've always had that kind of inner drive that says, okay, we've reached this level. Later, I learned to congratulate myself for that rather than just always keep driving without acknowledging that, right? Yeah. So, okay, learn that. But nonetheless, I've never been one to just be home, hanging out, watching TV, and that's it. Yes, of course, I know how to relax and I like to have fun and all of that. But in general, I like to go to the next level, whatever that is. And I also have a personality where it's just me. I think it's Berkman. I'm not really sure which assessment, but it's one of them around what kind of a job in general, not title, but characteristics of a job would you be most happy in? And mine was always around changing, like not going to the same office every Monday morning at 9 a.m. or whatever is time, depending on the country where we start. In France, it's 9:30, right? So, team meeting at 10, every week the same, go home at 6 or whatever. That is not me. Yeah. It's not me. So actually, after my MBA, I knew I needed to get into something like consulting because it just changes all the time. I see new clients all the time. I learn new things all the time, have different colleagues. You get the point, right? On and on. Yeah. So I already knew, I really believe transformation is part of my blood. And plus, to get into my life more later, there's two key values. In fact, one of them I named my company after, but the first one is courage, because I've done some things that at the time people thought were absolutely crazy. So things like coming from Kentucky, I say this one a lot, but it's true, still mom household, to just taking off to Paris, right? And I had no job, almost no money, no plan, except I'm going to live with this really cool French family I had met, very loving. I trust find something. My French was somewhat understandable, but not really. And, why did I do that? I trusted gut, right? That's the second value, authentic to me, to what I felt was right for me. And so there have been a series of other things I've done like that. Like, for example, when I was a secretary applying for one of the best MBAs in France. And so actually, I don't know a lot about the English culture, so I hope you'll like me there. But I can tell you in the States, that would not be shocking. Mm-hmm. But in France, it's utterly not. You don't do that. Like, they're different. Secretary does not try for that. So to your question, because I don't mean to diverge totally, but just to express how that's part of who I am on the one hand. Yeah. And how did I get into it? I was always drawn to change, like I said. And then from a background perspective, I had a pretty rough road as a child, right? So at a young age, I had a lot of, again, developed skills, but also had that desire to improve things and change things. And so I had found myself in France. I had found myself in the MBA, like I said, which was a big deal, which is kind of fast forwarding through a lot of things. Before that, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I made it work, right? I'm really resourceful. That's another verb. That's another value I would say. I worked with a CRO, a pharmaceutical organization, telecom. So there's a lot of different things I did. Why do I say that? Because I had all these skills in all these different industries. And so when I got out of school and I started consulting, I found myself in change management consulting for a boutique firm in Paris. But ironically, because at least in my eyes, when I think boutique and tiny, I think few opportunities. They sent me around the world. So I went to Japan and South Korea. Those were the most exotic to me because otherwise they sent me to Canada, the US. I mean, I'm not saying they're not great places. They just weren't so exotic. Uh, and what did I get honed in even more? Even more. We're all human.
Yeah.
So we have all these external seeming differences, whether it's color of skin, religion, sexual orientation, right? We could go on and on about all the things that supposedly make us different. But at the end of the day, we peel back the layers, or to use the model that I often use, the iceberg model, right? We go down to the root of it. We all have the same kind of needs and the same kind of desires.
Mhm.
We all just want to be loved, really, and belong and feel like we matter and we're making a difference. And of course, at the root of all that, that we're safe,
Yeah.
right? And that became really fascinating to me about all of this turmoil in the world going on. And we're forgetting who we are. We're forgetting totally who we are and how connected we are. And so I just started always, as I said, deepening my level with myself, like my understanding of myself, which helps me understand other people more, right? That's the dichotomy there. Well, of course, when we do more self-development. I will say transformation is I love that you use that word, Tony, and thank you for that, because a lot of people throw out the word change a lot and they interchange the words.
Yeah.
And in my book, there are two different things. So this morning I put on this blouse. Sorry for that. I put on this blouse and I can take it off later. I can put it back on tomorrow. I probably won't, but the point is I can, right? That's change. You can change back and forth, choose something different for a meeting, go back to the old way the next meeting, right? This kind of thing. With transformation, it's like the process from the caterpillar to the butterfly. So the butterfly never goes back to being a caterpillar. So how I got into transformation was already being in that mindset. And then I followed what I call the Reese's Pieces. If you remember the movie E.T., where he's following the Reese's Pieces home, right? And I believe we all have our paths to get where we're supposed to be, not in a duty kind of way, but in a way that feels like home to us, right? In this lifetime. And I followed the paths, the Reese's Pieces. And I ended up working very closely with a company of stellar facilitators, some of the best in the world. And a lot of them I noticed they all had this amazing quality about them, just extremely kind, walking the talk. There was none of this politics, backstabbing that we often find in a workplace. And especially they were gifted, excuse me, coaches and facilitators. And so I just asked them, and they had studied with a particular woman. I will give her say who that is here because she's another English, wonderful lady named Gita Bellin. And she helped me understand transformation, the humanness of it. And she's one of the pioneers of bringing that into the business world. And so the group that I was working with started an experiment to see, is the business world really ready for this stuff? Because it was bringing in more, I'm not sure if I can use that word here with you, but I'll try, spiritual stuff. Today, we don't always use that word with clients. We use the word meaning because spiritual scare people and think we're gonna, it's different than religion, by the way. But anyway, my point is, we came to see that people were craving this, just craving connection, craving meaning. And it really resonated with me. I felt like that was my purpose here, is not teach anybody anything, but it's help people remember who we are.
Yes.
And really have that inner drive to want to transform a self. But why am I talking about self? Because we know that it starts with self, right? Leading self and then leading teams and then leading the system, which might be the organization or it might be a larger entity. So I'm going to pause there. I said a ton load, probably more than you wanted to hear.
No,
And so happy to hear your thoughts or anything.
No, I think it's fascinating, Colleen, and you've covered off so much within that sort of introduction around what drives you, how you've developed personally, but also how you've developed professionally, but how that then gets translated into what you do today to help organisations. And I think there's a few things that came out. One, you answered my first question of the podcast: is how do you define transformation? And that description around the difference between change and transformation, I think, is very insightful, and I share it. I think it is that a transformation is something that you don't move back to, you don't go back to. Once you've gone, you've transformed.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the new state. And so, absolutely buy into that. But I was fascinated to hear, and I know you didn't use this term, but you were talking about stuff that really is, that I sort of see as that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, about the individual, and the individual being the very center of what we do within organizations. Because fundamentally, organizations are made up of technology, processes, systems, but fundamentally it's the people that tend to make the difference in the majority. Not everyone, but certainly the majority of organizations, it's the people that can derail a change or a transformation, but at the same time it's the people that can actually drive it forward and make a difference. And that's what I'd like to explore a little bit further with you around some of the things that you do when you're engaging with clients around building that philosophy, I suppose, that leadership philosophy, that building that leadership effectiveness, and also something else that you talk about around that emotional intelligence. So those are the two things I'd like to explore a bit deeper as we go through the conversation. So that first one, before we get into the detail about leadership effectiveness, just coming back to the point around really understanding and getting that detailed understanding of what it means to the individual at a very foundational level. What are the sort of things do you recommend that leaders do when they starting the process of developing a transformation initiative?
Yeah, well, the first thing is be willing to walk the talk. That's crucial, right? There occasionally I'll run into teams or leaders are like, that team there, they need to, whoa, what are you doing? Because it will only go so far with that team if you're not role modeling it. So that's the first thing. But I heard you say two things, Tony. So let me just double check, because you asked me, what do I do to create that or help create that? And then you said, what do I recommend for leaders? So which angle would be the first one or best one to take?
Let's talk about, I suppose the fundamental part of this podcast is to help people to embed transformation within organizations. So if we can focus upon the elements that you think
leaders' perspective,
leaders could take from this in terms of some nuggets you can apply over the next week, 2 weeks, what next?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Well, the first thing is to understand, there's this quote, and I am not sure who says it, but I love it, is if not me, then who? If not now, then when, kind of thing. And Gandhi also talked about be the change you want to see, which is somewhat of a worn out phrase in my view, but it's still extremely pertinent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because again, and I work with a lot of organizations at a high level, and consistently we roll out first and foremost leading self as workshops, as programs, and then it's leading team. So that's one key thing to bear in mind. It starts with the individual. That's really important, right? It starts there. The second thing that I have found to be a real aha moment for a lot of leaders is that idea of slowing down is crucial.
Mm.
We have it either by habit, by pressure, right? The world we live in. But a lot of us are running, and those of us who know neuroscience, in the very fast left brain, beta wavelength, which is, compared to waves on a beach like this, which is very handy for rational thinking. It's very handy for multitasking. We do need it, not throwing it out at all. The thing is we're limiting ourselves by just using that in our brains, because real transformation starts happening when we slow down and can tap into our right brain also, not only, but also where we get creativity, intuition, aha moments. Because transformation is not an intellectual, an intellectual understanding, in my experience, helps us feel safe. Mm-hmm. Helps the smart cookies feel safe, that this actually makes sense. That's what helps. That's important to feel safe. That's what we need, because we're talking about changing ourselves or transforming ourselves. Therefore, we need to faith, because we're going into territory that feels uncomfortable. That's normal. We're enlarging our comfort zone. Yeah. And by that nature, we're stepping into discomfort. So the IQ part is important, but it's not what's going to change us. It's going to help us feel safe. Okay. What helps us transform is actually embodying more of the parts of ourselves. So and here's where you have the EQ part coming in, more comfortable with all of our feelings, all of them. Now, I'll still to this day hear different people talk about bad feelings and good feelings, or appropriate feelings and inappropriate feelings. And if I may, this has been one of the huge deal breakers in my own growth. The Center for Nonviolent Communication talks about feelings not as right or wrong, good or bad, appropriate, inappropriate, but as indicators of whether or not, and you're right, our needs, Maslow and beyond, are getting met. That's it. So when I'm angry, there's a boundary that's been crossed. And sometimes I cross my own boundary. When I'm sad, I'm losing something very important to me, right? So they're information pieces. Yeah. But the thing is with feelings, and this is my take on most of the world, and I've done a lot of deep work on trauma, my own and others, and a lot of that is people not wanting to feel the uncomfortable stuff. Yeah. Right. And so it doesn't just go away because we don't want to feel it. If only, I mean, I came up with all kinds of cool things, like packed my agenda where I could hardly even move. It was so busy, and attaching myself to men for long term, right? I found all these ways to try to escape my feelings. Yeah. It doesn't work. It just stays in our nervous systems. And then, all kinds of things happen to our physical health, our emotional health. So that would be it, is being open to feelings is a big deal. Because if we go back to that idea of the iceberg, which not everybody's probably aware of, which is normal, but psychologists compare us to the iceberg. Why? Not because we're cold, thank gosh. When I say us, I mean humans. Not because we're cold, thank goodness. Although maybe, but similar to icebergs, which geologists say, only 10% of the iceberg sticks out above the water, right? And so it is with us. 10%, which is our behavior, and the other 90% is below the water. So people don't see it. They might make guesses, but they don't see it. But that 90% is still driving our behavior. And it's basically our subconscious. We can call it subconscious. We can call it mindset. We can call it a lot of different things. But what's under there are thoughts. How am I talking to myself? So I'm in the field I'm in, and I was honestly shocked to understand that I was still talking to myself in horrific ways, like very unkind ways. Well, of course, that's going to be at the root of my mood and the way I behave after, right? So becoming aware of that and working to shift that feelings, becoming aware of them. I have found that embracing whatever I'm feeling, the Buddhist, and I'm not Buddhist practicing, but I love what they say. They say, invite all your feelings to the table. Understand why they're there. What do they need? Right? love that. That has been one of the keys to me embodying transformation, because an emotion is energy in motion that needs to be felt so it can be released. And then, so there's thoughts, feelings, values. What am I valuing in the moment? I talked earlier about some of my values. We're always living a value. We might not know what they are, but we're always living them. And other people are making some assumptions about us based upon what they see, right? So being not only aware of our value in the moment, but a choice of our value is going to be key. And then at the bottom, it's our needs. Our needs, so human to have whatever the need is. It's normal to want to be loved. It's normal to want to count. It's want to feel safe. Where we get tripped up, here's the number one thing where we get tripped up as leaders, as people. When we go outside ourselves and say, I want to feel safe by all of you doing what I want you to do. Or I want to feel safe by you liking me. I'll do whatever you want, Tony, so you'll like me. Like, I'll stop talking to you, like, kind of thing, right? And of course, it's wonderful to get love from others. It's wonderful. But it's the icing on the cake until we learn to get to ourselves. And yes, we use the word love at work, although in some very, very, very conservative environments, we might use the word care instead. But it's true. As we know, all emotions are boiled down either into fear or love. And so
Interesting, isn't it? That
my tips are being open to everything in the iceberg, basically.
absolutely. It's interesting because so many things that that you've said sort of chime with me in terms of that willingness, and a lot of leaders perhaps openly don't make themselves willing to do this, but that willingness just to step back and take a moment or take time to understand why you're feeling the way that you're feeling, as opposed to just reacting to stuff, is such a critical skill. And many people don't give themselves the right to take that time and to step back and to consider. And as you say, bring the emotions out and understand what are the drivers for the way that you're feeling. Because actually, it's just an event. What's ever happened and what anybody's said, it's just an event. And it's the way that you react to that or respond to that event will determine whether it's a big thing for you or a small thing for you. But all too often, we react as opposed to respond. In my experience, I think it's a human experience, and I think that can make a significant difference. And coming back to the point about walking the talk, it is absolutely critical. And it's interesting. I know you were pointing at the screen when you were saying about that team over there, but I remember hearing it this year.
Yeah, I did mean you.
I can't remember who said it, but it's like every time you point, you need to remember that three fingers point back at you.
Yeah, exactly.
It has to come from within. I think that's
exactly.
Key message.
No question. No question. Few things. Again, depending on the cultures, depending on what we lived in our families. So depending on national culture, family culture, a lot of us were taught it's not okay to feel. And those of us who were raised in very dysfunctional families, and there's actually a lot more in the world than we might think. I did a recent research paper that, at least in the kind of dysfunction I live, it affects 25% of the world. And that includes, at least in the UK and US, it's been measured, and that's the number for both countries. So what do I want to say about that? When we were younger, it wasn't safe to feel. So a lot of us have a lot of triggers going on, right? So like you said, it's just an event, and that's true. And that's the grown-up in us knows this. But as we know with triggers and projections, if it looks like, tastes like, smells like, seems like anything resulting in our past, right? The horses, I'm from Kentucky, right? With the thoroughbreds. So thoroughbreds are off to the races, right? And so it indeed is quite, not only, and if I may, with respect, not only do we have the right, I think we owe the world that because the more we're taking care of our circle and becoming less reactive and more responsive, which is a process. I've been doing this work a long time on myself and on others. And guess what? Just in the last few weeks, I've uncovered yet another thing I'm reactive to.
Yeah.
So it's not like one and done, right? It can be a process, but just that willingness, I know for myself, and I again, this is a firm belief. This is how we're contributing to peace in the world, because we're becoming willing to sit with those. They're not bad feelings. We're not bad because we feel them. We're not bad because we think those thoughts. They're uncomfortable. And we get to the other side of them and we learn, like you said, to respond, to breathe, create a little, like Viktor Frankl, anybody who's read that wonderful book, Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl, who was do you know who I mean?
I've heard of him. I haven't read the book, but I've heard of him. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So just for those who are listening, and it's not to put a damper, it's just to put a context in it. I mean, this man went to 4 concentration camps during World War II and lost the love of his life, lost all of his family, was tortured. I mean, you can just imagine. And he started talking to a lot of the different other prisoners, and he realized that what he came to was people have a will to live. What had them give a will to live was having a purpose in their life, right? And he also said, and it didn't matter. It didn't matter how wealthy they are, how many cars, where their kids go to school. None of that was in play. It was, what is my purpose? And he found that his was helping people remember that there's one thing nobody can ever take from you, and that's an attitude, right? And that's the attitude we get to choose in that moment of response. We have that power of choice. And that sounds like, yeah, la-di-da, no big deal. This is where the rubber meets the road, because this is where we're truly role modeling the responding and the person we want to be, and what's the value we want to live in that moment. And so that it's actually all, I mean, in my experience, it's really to want to work on it is awesome, and to be willing to roll up our sleeves and do that process. That's probably one of the hardest things of the transformation journey.
No, absolutely. So you said it's the work that you do starts with the individual, then moves to team, then moves to organization, or however we define organization. So you've spoken a lot about that real starting point and why those foundational aspects are so important. Now let's sort of go on to the wider piece around the team, the impact on the team, and then the impact on the organization. What type of things do you typically see with the leaders that you're working with that are the things that trip them up, and ultimately, the things that you help them put in place to support them to make the changes that are needed?
Yeah, well, the biggest thing that trips them up, no question, are the courageous conversations. Or you can call it honest conversations. Yeah, that's the biggest thing, no question. You might know about Patrick Lencioni, and he has the 5 elements. He calls it of dysfunctional teams, but I like to turn it around because we don't want to talk about dysfunction. We talk about function, right? And functionality and effectiveness. So every time a team has an issue with courageous conversation, which in my view, I've never met a team that doesn't. I have teams that are in denial about it, but I've never met a team that doesn't. Then we need to go back to trust and understand where's the breakdown in trust here, right? And really work on not just a trust. And that's why we start with the self, by the way, because there are lots and lots of teams or organizations that these are our values. Everybody adopt them. You adopt them. These are about, whoa, if you want people to be genuinely in that groove, we have to ask them what they think about it. And we have to ask them, how do you view these values and what's important to you? And how could those possibly fit in with what's important to the organization, right? We have to take a back step. And that's part of the trust building with them and to actually come together as a team. So the biggest thing that trips them up is the courageous conversation. And what is it about them? Most people I work with comes down to they don't want to create disharmony. They think they are rocking the boat by setting a boundary, by saying no, which is setting a boundary, right? By saying, hey, when you said this, this brought up this in me, and and so then what's harmony but a value, right? So we have to look at that. What's the definition? Well, it's everybody being happy. Really? Is it? Because are you happy when you're not expressing what's important to you and what you need? Because there's disharmony inside. So then it's people pleasing, right? And then we have a look at that about how is that really helping. I talk a lot about the world, as you can tell, because you can talk about your mini MINI world with the team, but that's the work that we end up doing. And we usually make them very uncomfortable by having them do the courageous conversations right there in the workshop.
And do you find
and they hate it,
so do you
but
find
then they love it.
that many times that if you're in a team, let's say a team of 20 or so, and you're feeling a certain way or feeling that actually this isn't progressing in the way that I want it to progress or the way that we've agreed that it should progress. So at the point where you bring that up into have those uncomfortable discussions, start those uncomfortable discussions. If there's a team of 20, probably another 5 or 6 will immediately jump in saying, yeah, I'm thinking exactly the same thing. So creating that opportunity to have those open and honest conversations brings out those issues into a discussion that you can actually move forward. Because if you're feeling it, it's highly likely that someone else in the team is feeling it, but they don't feel that they can open up the conversation.
Exactly. Most people individually think that they're troublemakers, they're being difficult, they're not a team player. We can go on and on and on. And I would intuitively say about 97% of the time when we speak up, other people feel the same.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Or, we have to go in as well with the notion when we have the conversations that this is my experience. This is the effect on me. Maybe we own our part, which is always at least 1%, meaning I may be making an assumption. I might be taking something personally. Maybe I did not properly communicate, which, I've been guilty of all of those things. Always, right? There's always something. But if we can go in realizing that maybe we misinterpreted it, maybe, right? Because we took it personally or whatever reason. Very often there's space when we can give that little bit of space, that it's not that the person did it to us. It's not that, we can also, it's a real, I don't speak Mandarin. Sorry, I don't speak Mandarin at all. But I do use one concept in the workshop around conflict, their word for conflict or crisis, which I think is the closest they get to conflict. Please, those of you who speak Cantonese, Mandarin, please forgive me if I've made a mistake. But it's to prove a point that there are 2 brush strokes in the moment of crisis. Do you know what those are, Tony, by the way?
No, please.
For them. So one is danger. For sure. There is a danger. Yes, there's a danger. We'll be even more separated, right? There's a danger. But there's also an opportunity for closeness. Word I make up, closeness, right? Like you said, like other people understanding we're not the only ones thinking it, understanding someone more deeply, what they value. I get to understand myself when I'm triggered. Why am I so triggered? Oh, that's happening. Right. And so there's an opportunity to come together more.
Yeah.
And I always challenge people in the room, like, think about any relationship in your life, put them in 2 categories. Those where you have to walk on eggshells, you don't dare speak the truth. And those where you're fully yourself and therefore may have undergone some conflict with that person, right? Which one do you value more? Which one do you feel better about? And they always say the ones where they've had the conflict, they've worked through it, they're fully themselves, right? And I'm like, there you go.
Yeah. It's interesting you should say that, and just bringing an organization perspective on it. It's been proven time and time again with research that if you've got a client or a customer that's got an issue, if they complain and you resolve that issue, they are a much stronger advocate for the organisation than they ever were before.
Oh, that's cool. No,
it's one of those things where, as an organisation, people almost sort of naturally say, "Oh, we don't want complaints. It's a bad thing." Actually, you should lean into complaints and encourage people to complain, to feedback. You can position it however way you want to, but the more you get that opportunity to resolve a conflict or a complaint, however you want to phrase it, the stronger that relationship becomes, and a greater advocate that they become. And what you're saying there is exactly the same within a team. You can disagree, but if you can disagree and then resolve it, that strength of that team becomes much stronger as a result.
Well, it's more genuine than the yes. I mean, the biggest danger to any leader is, and I see this paternalistic, excuse me, any kind of paternalistic or cultures, right? Whether that's organizational culture or national culture. What you see a lot is you see the big boss walking in, everybody's like, "Oh, daddy's here, I better say yes," And while that might do a wonderful job stroking ego, what's the danger? Yeah. People saying yes now, not meaning it. And then you find out later that they really felt no. And we will find out, because that's how the silos get created. That's where the passive aggressivity comes in, delays, mistakes, etc. All of that happens when people do not give a genuine yes, right? And the only way I have seen that they get to a genuine yes is when they feel the psychological safety. What does that mean? No ramification. They say what they want with no backlash. Like, for sure, it's safe to say exactly what they feel and need. Doesn't mean everybody's last whim is going to be taken into. It's just not possible. That's not reality. We can't say yes to everybody. But when these needs and wishes are sincerely taken into consideration, sincerely, not just, "Oh yeah, okay, check the box, let's go." People can feel that, right? They can feel the fakiness. Plus, I don't think we should treat people like that. But when we sincerely listen together, here's a word that works wonders: co-create. Together, co-create our future. Okay. Yes, the leader can come in and say, "We have these certain guardrails, though, because we have to deliver this or by this time, or here's the guardrails we have." Okay, so given these guardrails, how can we co-create the future? But those are the conditions where people will likely stay on that bus to transformation. And I'm using the metaphor of the bus from a game. I got to give a plug for them because they're awesome. It's called Works in Denmark, in Copenhagen. They came up with this awesome management game. I got to put a plug in for it because it's so wonderful. People love playing it. But they literally have buses. And it's like, how can we keep the people in the game? How can we keep the people on the bus to change? And that's how. Listen to them genuinely, which means we hear, complain is what? It's just a muffled request, basically. Yeah. But anyway, Tony, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I use that analogy a lot. It's whether it's a bus or a train, we're at the station. This train's leaving the station. We're going. You can choose whether to come or not. There'll be a choice that you've got to take as an individual, whether you come. Yeah, but I totally agree. If you can build that environment and that culture of that co-creation, it gives you the opportunity for everybody to lean into the change and by leaning in, they're taking ownership of it, which helps embed it in due course. So totally accept and agree with what you're saying. Just a quick question in terms of creating that environment that is real and not just management speak as such. But what are the things that you encourage leaders to do, especially if they are relatively new leaders, to be able to create that environment? And I'll give you a story that I've done some work with lots of very traditional organizations over the years, and one in particular, and this goes back 10, 15 years. and we were implementing a new system. And I went in as a relatively inexperienced leader of the change. And I was shocked to hear at the time so many middle managers in particular saying to me, okay, yeah, we'll listen to you, but we know we keep our head down long enough, you'll go away, because every 6 months something else starts in this organization. And breaking that culture was really, really hard. It took us 12, 18 months to break that culture. So a program that should have actually, to implement the system, should have taken 13, 14 months, actually ended up taking us nearer 3 years, because we had to do the work up front to break that culture, to break that thought process that actually we keep our head down, we don't lean in, we just stay passive, we don't get involved, and you go away. Mm-hmm. So what are the, given that and your experience, what are the things that you would encourage a leader to do to create that environment where people can lean in, can get engaged, can co-create?
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, what you've described, I've encountered many, many times. And in my experience, and I'm not pointing a finger at you, right? Or that situation. I'm just saying to pull the joke in from earlier when I was doing this. It's when people rush to, if we go back to that Patrick Lencioni model, right? And we look at its trust, which then leads to the constructive conflict or courageous conversation. Then you have shared ownership, where truly have a real yes, not just a I'll say yes because that's the boss kind of thing. And then accountability. And only then do we get to results, right? It's at the top of the triangle. And so the first four are really about relationships and people. Yep. And the mistake, first of all, I see over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. We don't have the time. We don't have the money to fool around with people. I'm being harsh in that statement. It's not always that phrase, but more or less, okay? We're going for the bottom line results right away. Yeah. And why is that a mistake? Well, there are a lot of companies who do it, and then they come back and they call people like me and you, and they say, we got a problem. They're silos. They're not communicating. They're, this and this and this going on, and our results are worse than ever. We need help, right? So if my bias is that they had just focused on not only, it's not a linear thing, right? Of course, we have to pay the bills. Of course, we have to make money. It's not that, but and brought in a focus on people from the beginning, right? Then they wouldn't be there. So as you were talking, Tony, okay, to narrow this down, I see two things: psychological safety and co-creation. Psychological safety and co-creation. How do we get to psychological safety? As a leader, walk the talk. Also show vulnerability. Yes, vulnerability. And again, and men in particular, well, women too, because women, in general at work, a lot of people are, can I really do that? So please watch Brene Brown's Power of Vulnerability, a TED Talk. Okay. There is some power, and vulnerability doesn't mean we have to break down and cry. You might notice earlier, and by the way, I didn't do it on purpose. It's part of me. I'm transparent. Some people are not comfortable around me because I say everything. But earlier I talked about coming from a dysfunctional home. That's comfort zone for me to say that. For some people, that's usually vulnerable, right? But you have an idea about me as a person, that I wasn't just handed a global coaching business, right? You have an idea about some of the path I've been through. And that's what we mean by vulnerability, is just, if we go back to the iceberg model, we lower the waterline, right? So people have a different idea of us, a better, clearer idea of who we are as a human, not just the role we have as leader. So vulnerability is part of the psychological safety. Vegas rule. And by the way, it is not my favorite city, even though I'm American. I do not, sorry, Vegas lovers, not my thing, but I love that idea of Vegas rule, right? What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Yeah. That's important to create that container. Yeah. And again, I can't say it enough. The more the leader's doing his or her own or their own work, the more they become somebody safe to go to. So the psychological safety co-creation. So I heard you say this train is leaving. Yeah. But one way would be, we know we have to, this is part of the guardrail, guys. We have to get on the train, or the train is going to go now together. Let's design how with all of our, we're going to do the best we can as a team, but not everybody's going to get every last detail adhered to. But here's why. It's not because we don't like you and you're not important. You're very important. But it's because we also have a business to run and we have to do this in the best way possible, right? So it sounds silly, but a lot of people will just need that space of being listened to, right? So those would be the two main things I would say: psychological safety and co-creation. Not that I'm telling you because I'm the boss. Yeah. Number one way to get people to say yes mean no.
Just finishing off, I know I just noticed the time. One of the things that you say on your LinkedIn post, and you brought a little bit out today, is around that ability to step back. And you're saying that on your LinkedIn, you talk about yoga and swimming and walking on the beach and stuff, which creates a great picture. So I thought, is that those activities that you do to almost create that time for you to think, to consider?
Oh yeah, thank you. Oh, what a great way to end. Thank you. Indeed. I have a few things. As within, so without, as advisor always tells me. So as my inner world is, and that's again goes back to the iceberg, right?
Yeah.
That's how I'm going to show up in the world. So whatever I'm creating inside myself. So that's how it's genuine, how I show up. That's how it's not fakey, right? That's how it's more sustainable or in transformation. And so, yes, I actually have a really strong, I meditate twice a day. Mm-hmm. I journal every day, 10 minutes, but I journal and I find, okay, of course, there are going to be days I don't. But I notice I don't sleep as well. Like there's more going on out there. Mm-hmm. Yoga every day. Seriously. There'll be occasional days I miss, but then I don't sleep as well because at least I need some like 15 minutes at a minimum. Swimming, no, I don't do it enough. It's hard to get to a pool in Lyon. And with respect to all of our French listeners, please hear me. There's so much great stuff, but their idea of swimming is not mine. I like to swim freely without touching people in front of me. That's not quite how they do it. So I don't really swim when I'm here, but I got to swim in Morocco a few weeks ago, which was great. I get to the beach as often as I can. That is my happy place. No question. I live an hour from the Alps. Bless those who love the mountains, and that's your happy place. Go for it. I'm a beach girl. So yeah, when I can, I go to those places and I just really work to create within me that space, because then I have more choice, right? And that's where our power lies.
Yeah, and isn't it? I totally understand the things that you talk you sort of discuss there and bring out. I've tried yoga. Need to do more of it, to be fair, personally. But walking on the beach, swimming, going for walks, I do as much as I possibly can. And I always find that whatever is going on in my mind and all the challenges that I'm facing or the issues or the questions that I've got, when I go and do the walks, when I go and just get out in nature, especially at the beach, suddenly ideas pop up. I'm not consciously thinking about them, but ideas are popping up. And that comes back.
That's the right brain coming in, Tony.
It comes back to what you were saying early on.
Yeah.
Give yourself that space to allow the things to come out of you.
Exactly. But Einstein was a smart cookie in more ways than one. The more that I learned about Einstein, seriously, this guy had it going on. And he said something like, okay, I'm not going to get the quote 100%, but it's very close. Yeah. He said, I think about it once and I can't get the answer. Think about it twice, I can get the answer. I go swimming and the answer comes. I mean, it's like, it's really that. It
Yeah,
is really that. If we think about when we wake up in the morning, because we've allowed ourselves in the rest
yeah,
to go to that place of relaxation, there's the answer, right? Or those of us like to run, not me. I wish I did, but I don't. But those of us who do, right? Walking on the beach, swimming, whatever it is, jumping in the shower very often. It's my aha moment. It's
yeah.
amazing. It's actually not so hard. We don't always have to keep pushing and forcing and trying. There's so much growth in just backing off for a little bit.
Agreed.
Really.
Agreed. And I think putting that into your daily activity, your daily life,
Mhm.
is
Even
such.
just 10 minutes.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It doesn't need to be an hour, doesn't it? It can just be a quick 10-minute walk or a quick 10-minute meditation, something, but ultimately all you're doing is creating space for yourself and
And
giving,
actually, it raises productivity and
yeah,
focus as well.
and given that message,
Mhm.
that the key message I think from today's conversation is it all starts within you as an
Oh,
individual,
question.
and every individual is the same. Building that sort of process into your daily activity is a critical skill to develop.
Yeah, and it's a win-win-win-win-win. That's so cool. There's so much we have to quote feel sad about in this world, and those of us who are feeling people, right? And there is.
Yeah,
But the thing is, like I said, it doesn't always have to be hard. The better we're feeling inside, literally, the more we're helping other people to feel better.
yeah,
Really. I speak more kindly to my kids. I'm more present. You know what I mean? It creates a wonderful reaction.
yeah, absolutely. I'm probably about to open up a conversation that we could develop for the next couple of hours.
Well,
But
maybe we'll do another podcast, Tony, because I really love this conversation. Though I've done a lot of talking. I hope that's okay.
no, it's
You can tell I'm passionate about this.
you just reminded me of a conversation I was having a few days ago with an old colleague, and and no idea how we got onto the subject, but we started to talk about actually, if you look across the world, and there's so many conflicts at global level, at local level, political, everything, then actually the focus is always on the things that make us different, or the things that we're different.
Separate
And
us.
actually,
Yeah.
if you break it down, probably 80%, certainly maybe 90%, we've got commonality, but we always focus upon the 10 or 20% where we differ. And if we just flipped and pivoted to say,
Well, that's the point. That's what is so beautiful, really.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that comes back to what
And
you
we
said.
look at all the religions, they all have their common base. They all started in the same, and then they split off. But there's so many things that big religions of the world share in common.
Yeah, yeah. And if we could naturally start to look at where are the commonalities, and this happens in change and transformation, to bring it back to the purpose of the podcast. Let's really focus upon where the
But
commonalities
that's
are,
that's
and then
how we
yeah,
transform.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And
Well,
it's not because I'm bad and I have to change because I'm messed up. I mean, I think we're broken in some ways, right? That how could we not be in this world, right? I'm just saying,
yeah,
right? A lot of us forget who we really are. That purity, if you look at the newborns when they're born, they come out, oh my gosh,
yeah,
they're like straight from the heaven. I mean, at least I'm sure it's not just my girls who were, I'm sure all babies are, right? And then somehow we lose that in the world, right? And it's not our faults, but I do believe it's our responsibility as much as we can to get back to that state of remembering who we are. And I also believe, or know for myself, my true state is connection with all of you. And I'm glad you brought in that whole separateness thing, because that's the thing that's so painful for all of us.
yeah,
Yet we agitate that by exactly as you said, adding to the differences rather than how are we connected? How are we the same? Because that's true. That's how it is, and I think our true nature is to be connected, to be one.
yeah, true.
Yeah.
Well, on that philosophical note, let's bring the...
I can go deep. I can go deep. The Kentucky girl in France can go deep. I'm telling you. I like to have fun too, though. So,
well, it's been a great conversation. Thank you very much for your time. And
thank you, Tony. I really enjoyed it.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Have a lovely day.
Colleen, thank you so much for joining me today. An amazing episode with so many elements that I'm going to embed moving forward. Thank you for listening to this podcast. We're always interested in hearing from you. What do you find useful from this pod? What would you like us to explore more in the future? Please do press the subscribe button. It helps us to reach more people and share the experience of all my guests. Until next time, lead with empathy, inspire with vision, and transform with courage.